What's up everyone, Landon with LMR.com. In this video, I'll be taking a look at Steeda's Bumpsteer kit designed for the S550 Mustangs and why it's important for your car. If you plan on lowering or you've already lowered your 2015 to 2018 Mustang, then you should definitely consider this Bumpsteer kit from industry leader Steeda. This kit is designed to properly correct suspension geometry and eliminate bump steer on your lowered S550 Mustang. Now, believe it or not, every car has bump steer. However, when you lower your Mustang, you increase the amount of bump steer that occurs because of the physical changes in tow. Undesirable bump steer is easily noticed whenever you go over bumps because the suspension is actually steering the car instead of the driver. The Steeda Bumpsteer kit replaces the factory outer tie rods and incorporates heavy-duty spherical rod ends for superior performance. Adjustability is extremely easy because of the included spacers, which are there to help properly dial in the suspension geometry. The tapered rod end is engineered to the exact specification of the spindle, so no drilling or modification is required when installing the Steeda Bumpsteer kit. Fitment-wise, this kit is designed to work with all 2015 to 2018 Mustangs equipped with a power rack. Now, because the provided stud now sits past the brake dust shield, you may notice some fitment issues if you're running a drag wheel setup. Regardless of the wheel that's on your car, be sure and check clearance before driving it. To begin the install, support the car via a lift or jack stands. Go ahead and remove both front wheels. Remove the outer tie rod to spindle retaining nut with an 18mm deep socket. Strike the side of the spindle with a hammer to free the rod from the spindle. Do not remove it from the spindle at this time. Use a crescent wrench to loosen the jam nut. You want to barely back the jam nut away from the outer tie rod. Take this time to measure the distance from where the outer tie rod made contact with the jam nut to the middle of the ball joint on the tie rod. This distance should be approximately 4 1/4 inches. Now you can go ahead and remove the outer tie rod from the spindle. Rotate it counterclockwise to completely remove it from the inner tie rod. Place the Steeda aluminum body and rod end assembly on a workbench. Thread the rod end away from the aluminum body. The distance from the edge of the aluminum body to the center point of the rod needs to be the same length as the factory outer tie rod. Again, this should be approximately 4 1/4 inches. Once that length is achieved, run the jam nut up against the aluminum body. Use a 15/16 open-end wrench on the jam nut and a crescent wrench on the aluminum body, and then tighten the two together. Thread the aluminum body onto the inner tie rod until it bottoms out on the jam nut. Ensure that the rod end is horizontally parallel with the spindle. Use a 15/16 open-end wrench on the jam nut and a crescent wrench on the aluminum body. Tighten the jam nut against the aluminum body. Before positioning the tapered stud into the rod end, place one of the provided tapered spacers over the stud. Slide the stud into the rod end. The tapered portion will be facing toward the rod end itself. Go ahead and position the tapered stud into the spindle. Check to make sure that the inner tie rod and bump steer assembly is parallel with the lower control arm. If not, remove the tapered stud from the spindle and rod end. Slide off the tapered spacer and install one of the provided spacers. Reinstall the tapered spacer, slide the stud back through the rod end, and then reinstall the tapered stud back into the spindle. Go ahead and check to see if this is parallel. At this point, use the appropriate spacers to make sure the inner tie rod and outer tie rod assembly is as close to parallel with the lower control arm as you can get it. Once you have the inner tie rod and bump steer assembly close to parallel, install the other provided tapered spacer with the tapered end facing toward the rod end. After that, install any of the unused spacers followed by the lower retaining nut. Place the provided washer over the stud where it passes through the spindle. Loosely tighten the provided upper nut. Use a 7/8 flat wrench on the tapered stud and a 15/16 deep socket on the bottom nut to fully tighten. This nut is going to be torqued to 50 pound-feet. Fully tighten and torque the upper nut with a 3/4 deep socket to 40 pound-feet. Ensure that the jam nuts are tight, and then go ahead and repeat these steps for the other side. Double check your work and get the car on the ground. Now you want to head down to the alignment shop so that they can properly dial in your suspension geometry. After that, you're all finished. All right guys, as far as installation is concerned, this should take you about an hour or two to get finished up. Minimal tools are required, and this is something that you can do by yourself. Again, Steeda's Bumpsteer is going to be for the S550 owner out there that have plans on lowering their car or they've already lowered their car. This kit makes a world of difference, and this is why I would recommend it to all 2015 to 2018 Mustang owners. To see more product videos from Industry Leader, hit that subscribe button and make sure you turn on notifications. This bump steer kit from Steeda for the S550 is currently available from the Real Mustang Enthusiasts, LMR.com.